Hi, I'm Robert.
And I'm Evelyn.
And this is Talking About It.
First of all, thank you guys so much for being patient. The holiday season has been a little busy. And by a little busy, I mean a lot busy.
Yeah, and also all the COVID-19 stuff keeping things from happening.
Yeah, so thank you guys for being patient and waiting a week for this. We really appreciate it. We're sorry that it was late, but hopefully this is a good episode.
Yes, let's hope so.
Before we get into it, we just want to say a big thank you to all of our followers and patrons this holiday season. Speaking of Patreon, we have new stickers.
Yay! And speaking of new stickers, anybody who emails me with the exact number of how many times Evelyn says in this episode, I'm going to send you a free sticker.
Do it. I dare you. All right. I'm going to just say it a lot now, just to mess. No, I'm not. Okay. But in actuality, so we have our design that is linked on our website and our social media to our TeePublic that has our little cartoon versions of ourselves as hobbits to be on a t-shirt or a sticker or any other merchandise that you might want from that. And hopefully we'll be getting more out soon, but that's the one we have right now.
Spoiler alert, I'm wearing a kilt.
Spoiler alert, I have pink hair. So, yeah, that's that part.
That's that part.
So our last episode
Is that what we're calling it? That part.
Yeah.
Okay.
So our last episode...
You know, that's a good name for a band. That part.
Anyway, our last episode was us talking about the movie stuff. And if you liked that, which a lot of you seem to, we have a bonus episode that's Patreon exclusive where Dad and I talk about the movie in real time, like pausing it in different parts, kind of processing what we're watching. Mostly me having questions and my dad getting exasperated and like trying to explain it to me.
Like, I don't think she watched the movie, to tell you the truth.
I mean, I was watching it, which is why I was so confused.
Why are they wet? Because they were in the water. Not quite that bad, but almost.
There was a few. But anyway, if you want more information or want more bonus content, definitely check out our Patreon. So, this is season 3.
Season 3.
This is season 3. This is our 21st episode. We have had 20 episodes already.
Okay.
That's amazing to me.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's 20 episodes. We're in season 3 because we're going into book 3, which is the first book of volume 2. So we wanted to process the last book a little bit now that, well, me specifically, now that I've had about a month since I've read.
Do you mean the last book or the last volume?
I guess the last volume is what I mean.
Okay.
So now that I've had a month to like really process it, I liked it.
You liked it?
I liked it.
Why?
There was definitely a lot more interesting aspects than I initially experienced. It was still a little difficult getting through some of those information dumps, but there were some really good whimsical moments, such as Tom Bombadil, that I absolutely adored. And just the sheer amount of detail that Tolkien writes in, I can really see myself like just seeing the world in my mind and just seeing what's happening. I feel like I'm there.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds good. What about when we saw the movie, the things that were missing in the movie that you thought should have been in, or things that were different from the book? What did you think about some of those?
So from a film student standpoint, I understand why they did not include Tom Bombadil. It was just a time thing that it didn't really contribute majorly to the overarching plot. It was a great moment, and he definitely got them out of a few problems, but as a whole, it's understandable why it was cut, and I'm not that upset by it. Even though I wish it was there, I understand why it wasn't. But also some of the stuff they added was just, like, with the orc stuff, while, again, I get it from a cinematic standpoint, there was a few times where I was just like, wait, what just happened? That truly confused me, that you really had to explain to me. Like, with them, like, being, like, birthing out of these, like, ooey gooey fetus creepy things. Like, I didn't understand the point of it, or why they added it. Besides the creepy, grotesque, these are the bad guys kind of thing.
Right. And, some of the other things that just grinds me is the fact that, so Gandalf in the book is the one that causes the water that washes away the riders to look like horses. Mm-hmm. But someone else gets credit for that.
Yeah, that's true.
In the movie.
Yeah. I understand why Glorfindel was replaced. It kind of sucks for him, but it makes sense that he was, because they needed to just introduce this female character that I'm assuming is going to be more important later. But also they just needed more women in the movie. Because in the books, we really only have Galadriel that's a major player. At least in the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah. At least in the first one. She's like the only major player. So I kind of like that they included like another woman in a strong role. So that was nice.
It's nice that there's a strong woman in a good role. But, what did it do to the integrity of the book?
That is a question I am not prepared to answer.
Because for me, we're suddenly turning the first volume into a love story.
That is true. Especially, like, what I'm assuming is the extras that I don't recall seeing before, where there was a lot of her and Aragorn, and I mean, I get that romance, like, is a thing, but it just wasn't that much of a thing in the book. And honestly, having more of a pining moment between them rather than, like, it being, like, confirmed straight off the bat, I feel like could have been more powerful, like it is in the book.
Okay.
Because in the book, they make such a big deal about how they can't be together. And it's like they do kind of, like, stay away from each other a little bit because of that. I think showing that in the movie and then in the sequential movies, having it, like, slowly build up a little bit more might have been better and definitely more true.
Because there's a reason that romance story is told outside of the main story.
Okay.
I mean, it is written down. It wasn't made up. But we didn't need it to get to where we are at this point.
Okay. I'm assuming it's a spoiler, which is why you're not trying to give too much away.
Correctamundo.
All right. So the last book ended at kind of a cliffhanger moment, and book 3 of the volume The Two Towers, chapter 1, Departure of Boromire, kind of picks up immediately after. Now, before we truly get into it, I almost forgot, we decided I was not going to do predictions for this chapter.
Correct, because basically most of this chapter is in the last 10 minutes of the movie.
Exactly. So I kind of know what's going to happen, so it was hard for me to make any predictions. So we decided I was going to make 3 grand predictions for this book that we'll revisit eventually.
Okay.
So my first one is Legolas will get shot by an arrow. I know that's kind of a cop-out, but here's my reasoning. Legolas is an archer, and he's a very agile elf. He's really just, he's always on it. He's got those elf eyes where he can see everything. And I feel like it would be very hard for him to get shot and very unusual for him to get shot, which is why I think it would be almost poetic if he did get shot by an arrow. So it's not a cop-out. I have actual reasoning behind it. Is that acceptable?
Okay.
Cool.
Next.
My second prediction is a little bit more straightforward. I predict that Pippin and or Merry will kill an orc. I think that in what's to come, that one of them, or maybe even both of them, will have an opportunity to just kill an orc in their fight to escape or something.
Okay.
I feel like that would be neat. And then, so I know Saruman dies, and I know Gandalf comes back, but I don't know the details around it. That being said, I'm predicting that Gandalf is going to be the one to kill Saruman.
Okay.
I feel like that would be really cool. Because I know the only thing I remember is Saruman falls off the tower, but I don't remember what happens prior to that. So I don't think he was pushed or anything. I think it's like a magic duel type situation. So, like, you're giving me this look about, like, what the heck? Am I totally just off base? Okay, so that one's probably wrong. Cool. Should we get into it?
Well, also, things about the movie itself as well. They did a great job giving us an example of what the Shire is.
Yes, I did love that a lot.
And we even get, the old man starting to smile, and the wife gives him that look, and so he turns it into a scowl.
Yeah.
Because he's not supposed to be a happy person.
Right.
When he tries to be happy, his wife reminds him, "You ain't happy." Maybe he's grumpy, one of the other dwarfs. But some of the stuff that wasn't in it that drives me nuts, I can't talk a whole lot about because it's kind of spoiler territory.
Okay.
And I really don't want to spoil some of the stuff in the
movie. Do we want
to
do a bonus episode where it's just you talking about it?
Maybe.
Okay, because you would have to be the one to edit it, and I would just have to publish it. Because obviously I couldn't edit it either.
Then the answer is no.
Cool. Anyway.
Unless we want to do just like keep the mic on and let them ramble.
I mean, we could do that. We'll make that a Patreon bonus episode. We'll just let you ramble on, and then I'll just publish as is. So that means you can't do your likes or ums either. Or so's.
What are you talking about?
Anything else?
No, but before we actually start talking about the content of the second volume, one of the interesting things I found back when I was doing some of my original research is that it was not originally supposed to be called the Two Towers. Originally, Tolkien wanted it to be called The Shadow Lengthens. He did not long after that said, how about Two Towers? But then he decided he didn't like Two Towers because he felt like that was almost spoiler information.
Okay.
Basically. I mean, that's not his wording. That's basically what he thinks.
Mm-hmm.
But his publisher said, now, which two towers are they talking about? Because there's more than just two towers. So that convinced Tolkien to keep it there.
Ooh! Can I make a guess on which Two Towers is referring to?
Yeah.
Okay. I legitimately was thinking about this. I was thinking that it's the Tower of Isengard. And literally this was from reading like the first chapter of the Two Towers. I think the other tower is, what did they call it? The White Tower? Yeah, the White Tower of Gondor. And I know there's a fight in one of the books. So I'm assuming it's these two towers representing the good and the bad that are like the main forces of the physical fight.
Okay. All right. We'll see what happens.
Okay.
Now, another thing I find interesting about this next book, book 3. So in book 1 and 2, everything kind of happened in chronological order. But here, that's not going to be so much true.
Okay.
And there are times when you may not know which one took place first.
Oh, great.
And you really don't need to know because they're so opposite of each other.
Okay.
For example, when in everyone else's story does Merry and Pippin run into Treebeard? It doesn't flippin' matter to the rest of the story. So I find that interesting that not a whole lot of information is given to us about the chronological nature or the chronological order of what's happening.
Wait, but wouldn't it make... Okay, if I have a vague recollection, Merry and Pippin are on Treebeard because he's bringing them somewhere, right? Or is that a spoiler territory? Just the fact that he's transporting them somewhere, that he's helping them get somewhere, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So wouldn't that make sense if we did know exactly what time that was, so we know when they arrive? Wouldn't that be important?
Not really.
Oh. Okay. Never mind.
If you think about it, it's like World War II.
Okay.
You can't study the whole thing all at once. So you look at, for example, one way to teach, World War II history is talk about the Pacific theater and later on talk about the European theater, or maybe even talk about what was going on in North Africa. You can't really mix it up, because then you start going, okay, who did what where? And that's kind of the same thing here.
All right. Okay. That makes more sense.
Long, dramatic pause.
So, that being said, do we want to go ahead and get into the content of things?
Yeah, let's go ahead and get into the content of this first chapter.
All right. So, something that when I went...
Remind them what the chapter is.
So, do you want to get into the content of this then?
Yeah, let's get in... I can't talk.
So, do you want to get into the content of this?
Sure. Let's go ahead and do that.
All right. So, this is The Lord of the Rings, Part 2, The Two Towers, Book 3, Chapter 1, Departure of Boromire. So, they really dive into it immediately. It was almost jarring at first when I read, the first sentence, how it really just jumped right into what just was happening.
Right.
It was in the middle of the action.
Yeah, it's like John Wick 2 to John Wick 3.
It really was. And that's, my dad's favorite movie right now, guys. But it really was, because... it took me off guard because I was gonna eat my dinner while I read it, but I had to be no, I have to focus on my dinner because I won't focus on eating if I have to do this at the same time. So I quickly ate and then I started reading. But yeah, it gets right into Aragorn still searching for Frodo.
And one of the things I find interesting here, and it's almost a throwaway, Aragorn is having a hard time finding the Hobbit footprints.
Yes, I noticed that too. I was going to bring that up as well.
Even for somebody who's a professional tracker, has a hard time seeing the footprints of hobbits.
Right. He was saying they're so light on their feet.
Right.
And that's something that we've heard before from the Hobbit.
Right.
And while it probably doesn't have anything to do with the main story, I still liked that detail.
And then we also get Aragorn talking to himself.
Right.
But that's more for our convenience to know what he's thinking.
Well, I mean,
than for him to actually think things out.
Well, I mean, we come from a family where we all talk out loud to ourselves to think things through, so it wasn't that unusual for me.
We never talk to ourselves. Yes, you do. No, you don't.
Interesting.
You can keep that if you want.
Okay. Anyway, so he's talking to himself, and he sees that Frodo went to the high seat. And he struggles with himself for a moment, trying to decide if that's something he should do.
Correct.
And so he eventually does, and he doesn't see anything. But I have two questions. One... Oh, wait, no, never mind. I only have one question. So Aragorn hesitates for a moment.
Restart and say, so I have a question.
So I have a question.
Okay.
So Aragorn, he hesitates, but he does go up to the seat and he sits down, but he doesn't necessarily see anything kind of like Frodo did. He just kind of sees far out into the world. He doesn't necessarily have any glimpses or even what he hoped for, which was guidance.
Right, and which is really interesting because of his blood. This seat should immediately respond to his desires. So it is just interesting. You know, is he just so conflicted about what he wants to see? Was the very fact that he was conflicted about should he keep looking for Pippin and Merry, or should I go do this first?
He was looking for Frodo.
Well, okay. See, I'm conflicted. I don't know who he's looking for. Let me do that all over again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's because he was conflicted. Conflicted between going up to sit in or going out to look for the lost hobbits.
Mm-hmm.
Or when he gets up there and sits down, he wants to see. He might be conflicted about what does he want to see. Does he want to see where the armies are marching? Does he want to see if Rivendell is okay? Does he want to see what the Shire looks like? That could all be going through his mind. And that's why he doesn't get a real connection.
Okay.
So, I mean, we don't know.
Right.
That's left there for our speculation.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the best. But I think that it's because he doesn't know what he wants to see.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the opposite of when Frodo sits in it. Frodo is worried about the Shire.
Mm-hmm.
Frodo is worried about his friends.
Mm-hmm.
And so he gets glimpses that help answer those questions that he has.
So, from saying that kind of brings up something that we've talked about Aragorn before, where Aragorn kind of knows what he does have to do, even though he has these, like, wishes and wants in his heart that he admits to. But he knows deep down what he actually has to do eventually. Could that also be it, where the chair kind of just like, no, you know your answer already to what you wanted, to what you need to do?
Well, see, I think that's the problem when he sits in the chair. He needs to find these lost hobbits, but he also wants to get an idea of what is going on so he can make his plans. Mm-hmm. And therefore he vacillates and doesn't really do anything.
Yeah. Okay.
He doesn't focus on one thing. That's how I read it. That's how I read it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So while Aragorn is still kind of looking for Frodo and still trying to figure out what's going on, he hears the battle horn of Boromire. He immediately recognizes it. And he starts running towards it because that can only mean trouble. And it keeps sounding and sounding until suddenly it doesn't sound anymore, which makes him even more panicked. As he's running, he's about to run into these orcs, and he raises his sword and he screams, "Elendil, Elendil." What's Elendil?
So Elendil is a person from the history of the Middle Earth.
Okay.
So him hollering that is, just like that quick prayer you might say.
Okay.
Oh God, oh God, oh God.
So like the war cry kind of thing that we talked about with Frodo when he yelled the elven names.
No, but this is not so much a this is not so much a war cry. This is almost like a "Dear God, what happened" type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why he shouts his name.
Okay. So he finds Boromire propped up against a tree, just full of slashes and bloody, and there's 20 dead orcs around him. Hot dang.
He be a beast.
Yeah. That he took out 20 of them before they got him. And something that I noticed is as Aragorn is there, like, the orcs just straight up retreat. They just straight up retreat, which it left me a little confused until we get a little bit more into the chapter.
Right. Okay.
Like, what? Like, I was with Aragorn. It's like, why did they retreat suddenly?
Okay. So here's a couple of things I want to talk about him finding Boromir first, though.
Okay.
Okay. So let's think about this scene. Originally, Boromir appears as if he's just at rest. God damn, Robert. So let's think about this scene as it's told in the book. At first, we see Boromir appearing to be at rest, leaning against a tree.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, he's full of black arrows.
Mm-hmm.
The horn is destroyed. This is symbolic of his loss of his voice. God damn, I can't talk tonight. The horn is destroyed. This is symbolic of him losing his voice. Not just his physical voice, but his voice as a leader, his voice as a politician, basically.
Okay.
The broken sword is a symbol of his might and leadership being crushed. Because it's broke off at the hilt. Now, we can also view Boromir's death in light of a Christian death as well.
Okay.
Right, so he makes a last confession.
Yeah. Pause. You're making a lot of things jiggle.
Well, so we can view Boromir's death in the eyes of a Christian death. So we can view Boromir's death along the same lines as a Christian death.
Okay.
Before he dies, he makes a last confession. Aragorn would not have known otherwise what Boromir had done. Boromir basically, he doesn't say the exact words, but he forgives him for that. And Aragorn is acting both as a leader and a spiritual guide for him.
Okay.
He dies a good death because he was fighting for a noble cause. He was trying to save the hobbits' lives. He dies in a state of grace because of the confession and because of letting go of the temptation of trying to gain the ring for himself. His last thoughts are of his people in Minas Tirith instead of where's the ring going?
Yeah.
What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to you? He thinks of his people, his family, and all those in Minas Tirith.
Yeah. It's sad.
It's very sad.
It is sad. Legolas and Gimli kind of show up and kind of ask what happened, and we find out that Merry and Pippin have been taken.
Right. And Aragorn sees all of this that happened as his fault, his failure.
Yes.
This can be seen as a noble thought, or is he seeing himself as some grand leader thinking that he was in control of everything, and now he's no longer in control of anything?
Yeah.
Is he feeling the need to save the quest from failure, or is he thinking about what needs to be done and not that necessarily he has to be in charge of what gets done?
Right.
So there's a lot going on in his mind.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, then here comes Legolas and Gimli. Legolas, now that I said that, I can't say it right. Legolas and Gimli show up after a great fight against the orcs. And you're talking about Legolas and arrows.
Yes.
He's completely out of arrows.
Yes.
He shows up, he has used all of his arrows.
Yes.
Legolas, he talks about the fallen.
Mm-hmm.
About Boromire first. He's the one that kind of begins the idea of we need to do something with him. We need something with his body so he's not ravaged by animals or bones are broken and disgraced. Yeah. So they, for all intents and purposes, they do a Viking boat funeral.
Yeah. That was the best they could hope for.
So while they're looking through all the stuff, they find the hobbits' weapons. And that's a good indication that if they didn't take these nice knives, these well-made knives, mm-hmm. somehow the orcs were afraid of them.
Yes.
And that's why they were left.
Yeah.
Legolas goes around and takes up as many arrows as he can.
Yes, which is very smart. Reminds me of Skyrim.
D&D, rule 1. Replace
your arrows.
And replenish. But he takes the arrows, which is interesting for me because in the movie, Boromire is full of these giant arrows.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't imagine that's what Legolas goes around and pick up, is those giant black arrows.
That's true.
But we do know that they're described as black arrows.
Mm-hmm.
So he is still going to be walking around with a quiver full of orc arrows, black arrows.
Mm-hmm.
And are they made as good as elf arrows?
That's what I was wondering.
Probably not. Probably not. But with somebody as skilled as Legolas,
they're still probably effective.
It probably doesn't matter. You got anything?
Mm-mm.
And then they find evidence that these are no ordinary dwarves. I can't say that. Couldn't do that. They find some evidence that there are no... They find some evidence... I'm going to start that all over. And they find some evidence that these are no ordinary orcs.
Yes, they find evidence that there are orcs from all over, like from the Misty Mountains and from all over the West, and that it's not just orcs, there's some goblins too. Right,
and they are wearing the symbol of the white hand, which...
With an S, a white S.
Yeah, there's a white hand.
Oh, that's right, a white hand.
And then there's an S on the helmets and so forth.
Yeah, which they first think is Sauron.
Well, I think one of the things...
But I immediately thought Saruman. But that's also part of the movie.
But also one of the things I always giggle about when I read this part. Gimli just states that S is for Sauron. Sounds very matter of fact for a dwarf, but it also kind of reminds me of Sesame Street.
It does.
M is for milk. That always cracks me up.
That's how dwarves learn their alphabet.
And then we get a little bit of an information dump. It's not really a dump. It's kind of a I don't know what...
It's not much of an information dump. It's more of Aragorn is thinking about stuff that is going to be important later. It feels.
Right. And Gimli even says, maybe there is no right choice.
Yes. Which oh my gosh. That's such a mood. It's a mood.
Right. I mean, are we allowed to cuss?
No.
It reminds me of my mom. Her favorite thing to say when she was driving and got behind some idiot would say, take a crap or get off the pot.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what he's saying.
Yeah.
It's like, don't stand there and do nothing. Do something. Even if it's stupid, do it. Mm-hmm. But Aragorn has got a little bit of a cooler head. He wants to try to think about this a little bit.
Yeah.
And before they do that, they get Boromir ready for his funeral.
Yes. They chop down a tree to be able to transport his body back. And when they get back to the boats, they notice that one is missing.
They notice missing boat, but they're not thinking about that right away.
Right.
So what they do is they arrange Boromir with his weapons and his property, and also the weapons of those that he vanquished.
Yes.
And so forth.
And his cloak.
Which
was very Anglo-Saxon. It's very Viking, very Anglo-Saxon burial type.
Well, I mean, it's the same way. It's the type of burial that they talk about in Beowulf.
Yeah.
But the one thing
which is what? Viking. I wish you guys could see the eye roll. It was good. Deep sigh.
So, they put Boromir in the boat with all his possessions, all the weapons and so forth of his foes that he's vanquished. Mm-hmm. But this is the one that I don't remember noticing this before. They combed his hair.
They did. Okay.
I thought that was interesting. They combed his hair, knowing that his boat is going to drift over a waterfall.
It's still a respect thing, I feel like.
Right. And then, so we know that boats are missing. But one of the things I find interesting about Boromir, forget about the whole fucking thing about it. Just said boats missing. Fuckity, fuck. So after he goes over, so after he's let loose, Boromir's boat, drifts off into the golden light.
Yes.
It reminds me kind of of the cowboy riding into the sunset.
Okay. Yeah.
The hero riding off into the sunset.
Mm-hmm.
And it's said that his body eventually made it all the way to the Great Sea.
It became told later
right.
That's what they had said. And I feel like that really shows us a little bit more of how respected Boromir was in life when he was in Gondor. Because it talks about how every morning he would ascend the White Tower, and that he was a well-known and well-respected leader among his people. And that's something that I did notice about the movie. I didn't think he was much of a jerk as they portrayed him. Like, in the books, I'm like, Boromir is just human. And in the movie, I feel like they really tried to turn him into a jerk.
Right. One of the things... But another thing I find really interesting is how Tolkien describes this scene at this point. So, 3, watch in silent. Mm-hmm. That's a very spiritual, religiously based, magical number.
Yeah.
And he returns back across the 7 streams. 7 is the perfect number.
Yeah.
In Hebrew, and some other cultures, it's the lucky number. And it refers back to us that it's almost a throwaway where he says he has come across the 7 streams when he arrives in Rivendell.
Okay.
Did you have anything you want to talk about when they're singing their song?
I appreciated this song. It was definitely very nice. I thought that it was very reminiscent of a morning song. Well, it is a morning song. What am I talking about? It is a morning song. And again, it shows the respect that they also had for their comrade.
Correct.
Yeah.
And Aragorn, while he did not know him, he probably knew of him. He's probably been keeping track of Minas Tirith his whole life. So in the songs, Aragorn starts and he talks about the west wind and the north wind. Mm-hmm. Legolas picks up and talks about the south wind. The east wind is never mentioned. And even Gimli makes sure we understand that. He goes, that leaves the east wind for me. But I'll not sing about that because that's that may bring evil things upon us type. It's not exactly what he says, but that's kind of what he means.
It's kind of what he says.
And in Minas Tirith, they never also in Minas Tirith, they never talked about the east wind as well. Because that's from which evil blows from.
Okay.
And they talk about whether or not they should try to track down Frodo or figure out something else to do. Mm-hmm. And it's remembered that Frodo did not want to lead a friend into death.
Yes.
So it's not like he left under duress.
Right.
He left. And when they go back to look at the packs, there are 2 packs missing. Mm-hmm. One of those packs is obviously Sam because Sam overpacks.
Yes.
And that one's missing. And I also love... You have anything else to say before I keep dominating the conversation? Mm-mm. And then while they're trying to figure out what to do, Aragorn's like, let me think.
Yes.
Shut the hell up and let me think.
Right. I honestly... sorry. Let me take that again because I yawned. I honestly really liked that. Where we see Aragorn just, again, being human. And really trying to think. And Legolas and Gimli just not being helpful at all. And he definitely goes through an interesting thought process trying to decide what's the right thing to do.
Right. And the decision he ends up coming with is the company has played its part.
Yes. They got him as far as they could, so now they must rescue those in need.
Right. And then the book ends, and this book, and this chapter pretty much ends with, elves, dwarves, and men go forth the 3 hunters.
Yes, and I really liked that.
And when he decides to leave, he springs up like a deer. Just, he doesn't say, okay guys, let's go. He just suddenly springs up like a deer. And they're on their way.
Yeah.
So anything we missed?
No, it was a pretty straightforward chapter, honestly. It was just a lot to digest.
It was a good tie-in from the previous volume.
Yes.
To drop us right back in the middle of what was happening.
Right.
So anything we didn't touch on? Anything else you want to bring up?
No, we were pretty much on the same page when it came to notes this time around.
Okay. So, predictions.
The Riders of Rohan. It is Rohan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Riders of Rohan. Okay. If I remember, correct me if I'm wrong. Aragorn is a ranger of Rohan, right? No? Okay. Then I have no idea what I'm talking about. Cool. I've definitely heard Rohan before. Wow. Riders of Rohan. They gotta be good guys, not the bad guys, right?
I'm not telling you.
Okay. I'm gonna predict that I'm gonna say it's Merry and Pippin are the ones that are gonna meet the Riders of Rohan, and they're gonna be like rangers or something.
Okay.
Is that 2 predictions or one? That's one. That's one
prediction.
Let's think. Number 2. So, do you remember the really annoying song "They're Taking the Hobbits to Isengard" from like the early 2000s, where they did like the random remix? That's like one of the few things I know. So I'm going to guess that they're talking about Merry and Pippin being taken to Isengard.
Okay.
So Merry and Pippin are being brought to Isengard. Okay. I will not be playing that song at any point in this podcast. Do not worry. And third of all, can I make a prediction, not necessarily for the next chapter, but incoming in the future?
Okay.
I want to predict that okay. So I'm going to make a prediction for this chapter, and then I'm going to make a prediction that goes with it that will be in the future. So I'm going to predict that we do not see Frodo and Sam in this next chapter. We don't hear from them yet. But I will predict that the next time we do see them, Gollum is going to show up within that chapter. Is that satisfactory?
Okay.
That I'm not going to be like, just like, oh, they're not going to show up this chapter like I was doing with Gandalf last time. But this is more of a, like, I truly don't think they're going to show up in this chapter. And I think that Gollum's going to show up immediately when they do show up.
Okay.
Cool. Awesome.
All right. Anything else?
I think that's everything. I just want to reiterate again, everyone have an excellent holiday. If we don't get another episode out before the holidays are over, we'll be on a more consistent schedule once January comes. We have questions open for holiday, where if you guys want to ask us questions, we will answer them at the beginning of our first chapter. We have questions open on Twitter and Instagram, where if you guys have any questions for us, we'll answer them on the first podcast in January. It's open through the new year, so anything that you want to ask us about our opinions on like the stuff on the books or characters and such like that, just feel free to ask us. We love talking with you guys. And again, we've got that bonus episode on Patreon, where you have some more bonus episodes on Patreon coming up, as well as we have a couple other things in the works that are only like ideas right now, so we're not going to talk about it until they're more concrete.
Right. And also, maybe one of the things that might help us get back into a regular schedule is Evelyn's job situation is going to change a little bit.
Yes, if you didn't see on social media, I am changing jobs. So that's one of the reasons we're a little bit busy, is finishing up with stuff on my old job, starting my new job. Actually, as of recording, I start in 2 days.
Correct.
So, yeah.
All right. Well,
okay, I think that's everything.
Okay, well, I've been Robert.
And I've been Evelyn.
And you've been listening to Talking About It.
See you next time.
Thank you so much for listening. I have been Robert.
And I have been Evelyn.
Podcasters are Robert and Evelyn Lewis.
Edited by Evelyn Lewis.
Produced by Robert Lewis, Evelyn Lewis, Regina, and Comic Canary.
Music provided by Ben Sound. Link in the description.
Support us on Patreon at Talking About It Podcast.
Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Talking About It.
And Twitter at Token Pod.
Thank you all again for listening, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.